views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening. Welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where every week we talk to journalists, writers, editors, filmmakers, videographers, photographers, anybody involved in putting stuff out in the Bronx. And I'm thrilled for a number of reasons to have my good buddy Michael Hinman, who is the editor of the Riverdale Press, with us. Nice to see you, Michael.
Hey, it's always great to see you, Gary.
Among the reasons, of course, we love talking about contemporary issues and your wonderful newspaper, but I know you weren't well, and I think it's instructive because people are interested in people's stories. So what happened? Do we know if you had the virus? I know you weren't well for a while. Let's talk about that.
Well, let's just say that I was able to find out where the state was doing antibody tests, so we'll hopefully know within a day or two whether I actually have the antibodies, but I never got sick enough to actually go get tested, and I didn't want to take a test away from somebody who would really need it. But yeah, I mean, about a month ago, I got a head cold, and it came with a fever, which usually don't come hand in hand, but it's like, oh, maybe it's different. The head cold went away in a couple of days, but the fever kept going, and it actually lasted for an entire week, which I've never had a fever last an entire week before. After that, I had muscle aches and everything else, and then once the fever finally broke, I just was wiped out for almost a week and a half. And I mean, I was sleeping literally like 20 hours a day. I had like zero energy. I lost my sense of smell, my sense of taste. I think you and your wife were great to kind of help deliver groceries to me a few times during that, which I really appreciate. That was very neighborly of you. And Gary, and I appreciate that a lot. And it was just, it's weird because like, even though I feel like I'm recovered from whatever that was, which it seemed like COVID-19. I mean, everything kind of points to that. Even my doctor says pretty much what that sounds like what it is, but I didn't get the test yet. We'll see if I have antibodies or not. But I mean, even though that my symptoms were pretty mild, I guess, compared to, what it could have been, it was still not fun to go through at all.
And I guess the initial question from me on that would be fear. I mean, were you scared? Because, listen, we don't know what direction it's going. The thing seems to have a mind of its own. You had to be thinking, is this going to get worse? And then I'm going to find myself on TV for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, it was tough, because I tried not to think about those things. I tried to stay away from even discussions of it. But, I mean, it was weird because I still had to work. And so every little pocket of energy I could find, I spent working. The papers still kept going out. I still had to keep writing. I still had to keep editing. I still had to keep laying out pages. So I think what happened was that while, the parts that I was actually conscious and working, able to function at least, that I think I spent so much time working, I didn't give myself time to worry about it. But yeah, I mean, I could tell you that there was times where I laid in bed and I just took these really deep breaths just to see, this how, my lungs were doing. I don't know if that's a great test or not, but, as long as my fever wasn't getting higher, I wasn't going to go and take up space from somebody who really needed to be in there. So
right, and we're certainly thankful that it didn't get worse. Now I'm going to ask you the kind of question: if you're a reporter, and I don't know, they're dredging a lake, and you decide to go in with the people dredging, and you live through it, and then you can feel like what it is. Do you have a different perspective in covering it, or writing about it, or working with your reporters because of having gone through it?
I mean, I do. I mean, if you, and you've been in newsrooms, Gary, but a lot of viewers probably haven't been in newsrooms. One way that we try to get through all of the stress that happens in a newsroom, because we're exposed to so many things that even, general people aren't exposed to. So let's just say like, we build kind of a lot of things, that kind of pile up that we have to be exposed to all the time. So we try to get through that with humor a little bit. And I can tell you, like at the beginning of the coronavirus, of the pandemic, there was probably some humor, especially from me in the newsroom. It was like, I think I got a little bit of coronavirus on my paper here. Let me brush that off.
What's the big deal? Right?
Yeah, what's the big deal? But let's just say that, it's kind of a mea culpa when you actually go through it. And then when you see the suffering that people have gone through and the fact that, we have lost people, we've lost and you know that as well. I'm really sorry about your passing of your mom, Gary. And
Thank you very much.
and I mean, it's just, it's just when you get touched that close to it, it actually kind of angers me when I see people in the news or get on social media and in other places and downplay it or act like it's nothing or act like, oh, it's the flu. It's not. I mean, it's just, this is something that's totally different. It has already killed more people than the flu. And the flu is a year-long thing, by the way. Those numbers are for a whole year. We're talking 2 months, and it's already killed more. And it really angers me about our response as a country, and not really as a state. I think as a state we've done pretty well, but we should, this shouldn't have happened. And so,
Right.
yeah, so I am personally angry about those kind of things.
Let's talk about the paper. We record the show, just for folks who want to know. We record it on Wednesdays, and Wednesdays is the day when the mail is running, and we are getting delivery. And I did get a delivery today, which is not regular and usual, but I did get my edition to Riverdale Press. And I have to say, Michael, I know. You got the same?
I got one too. Wow, that's well coincidental.
But I have to say, Michael, and I know you're recovering, so maybe you got a little more energy. It's a wonderful edition, and I've read every paper for many, many years. There is a lot in here to talk about. And before we talk about any of the specifics, I talk about your writers. Now, we had Kirsten Brennan on the program, on the program last week, and she really was wonderful and a revelation. I see here on a byline in the front, there's someone named Rose Brennan.
An intern from Manhattan College. Yeah.
So let's talk about and the Riverdale Press as incubator for so many writers over the years. But let's talk about your staff now. Kirsten is fabulous, right?
Yeah, Kirsten. Yeah, and I by the way, I really am so happy that Kirsten came on your show. Like, it seems like everybody in my staff has always been kind of camera shy. Since Tony Capote, it's just been like nobody else is really, except for Julius. I know Julius has been on here, my photographer, my photo editor. But it's my staff has been working so hard. We've all, they've all been remote for a month now. They've everybody's had cutbacks. We're actually down a reporter. We have a full-time position. It's not even been filled. We actually have somebody ready to go, but because of what's happening with the pandemic, we've had to put that on hold for right now. And it's been, and the fact that all the reporters are working so hard to get these stories out, and you won't believe how much it's not easy doing it remotely. It's not easy being wherever you live, which is, sometimes outside of our coverage area, and being able to do that. I mean, I'm lucky that I live here, so I can sneak over to the office like I just did today. And it's not really sneaking. I can actually do. I'm essential. Media is essential, apparently.
You can't sneak anywhere. Don't you tell me.
But no, I'm so proud of them. And I mean, and the fact that these, even though that, a lot of them, I'm sure, are doing these stories in their pajamas, but they have not lost their sense of professionalism, their hunger for news. And it's so amazing when I see the paper each week. It just makes me proud. And I think that's what actually kept me going while I was sick, is that, that my whole staff kept coming together, and they kept reminding me why we do this.
So out of all the many large, wonderful features and everything else in the Riverdale Press, I picked out this one tiny little column in the political arena
Of course you did.
that you wrote.
Well,
I just think it's fascinating. Look, everything now has immense implications everywhere.
Yes.
But you apparently did either an interview or pulled it off a release. I'm not sure.
Off release.
Senator Biaggi and her concerns about the budget process. And I saw in one of I think it was City and State New York, and the governor said, budget negotiation, this was the easiest budget we did. We had no money.
Exactly.
But talk about the process, what it was, and what you think Senator Biaggi is alleging.
And it's that was that particular piece that you saw in the paper, the political arena, came from a release. But the senator and I have actually talked about this quite extensively in the past, especially the first time she went through it last year. I mean, I think that she and I spent probably half an hour on the phone just simply talking about this the amazing circus that is negotiating the budget, if you can even call it that. And really, what it is that the governor steps in, says, "Here's the budget." And everybody else just has to nod their head and say, okay. And that's what the process is. And I think what she would like to see, is how it's like in most other governments, is that the governor and the legislature actually have equal roles, to where they both can kind of help develop the budget together and not have to fight for scraps, which is basically what it is and what it has been. And it's not Governor Cuomo's fault. It's not it's been like that for probably 100 years. But it's something that I think that you have some lawmakers who've just been doing it for a long time. Like, I'm sure someone Dinowitz has been doing it for a long time, so you kind of get used to it and you just learn how to play that game. But when you get fresh eyes in there, like Senator Biaggi, and say, "Hey, wait a minute, this can't work."
Let's just clarify that. I mean, it traditionally had been they called three men in a room. Of course, now it's two men and a lady and a woman in the room.
Yeah.
Don't the three of them kind of work together before the governor puts out his budget?
They do. I mean, there is some, but it's still the governor is the one that has all the leverage. So yeah, I mean, and how much the legislature can be involved is really up to the governor. I mean, and I think that you'll see that they work together a little bit because they obviously have to work together all year round. But really, you could it's not that there's a particular issue with how Governor Cuomo is doing. Like, I don't think the senator has any issues with that, at least that I'm aware of. I think it's just that you get let's say you get like a governor in there that might be, let's say Donald Trump was our governor instead of, just imagine what he would have done with that process.
In that same circumstance.
Yeah.
Michael, I know from being in the media for a very long time that when things like this happen, on one level, it's a challenge. I mean, certainly like nobody's ever had to deal with, we've never had to deal with something like this where I'm doing my programs from my home.
Yeah.
But when you have an angle that everybody deals with, it's almost like a hurricane or, the universe. When I was a radio DJ, I had a colleague who said, I love to talk about the weather because I know everybody's dealing with it. And so in this case, so is there a level of this where, we don't want to say it's fun to cover because you certainly wish it was because everybody just won $50 million.
Yeah.
That would be a much happier story. But there is something inspiring about being a journalist during this time. I find that. And I'm curious about how that bounces off of you.
It is. I mean, obviously, in the news business, we live for news, and it's one reason why I fought so hard from coming up from the smallest media market in the country to the largest. It's because I wanted to be surrounded where news was there, where stories were waiting to be told. And the thing about the coronavirus is, yes, the coronavirus is an overreaching story where it does affect a lot of people. But the thing is that there are so many stories that are affiliated with that. So many stories. I mean, you talked about there being a lot of things in the paper this week. You should have seen what made the cutting room floor, which we hope to get it next week or the week after, and things that we're working on. I mean, we had our weekly editorial meeting today, remote. This is how you and I are doing it right now, actually, and with the staff. And and just hearing the stories, even that we're working on next week, I think that you'll be like, hey, let's get somebody back in the paper again, because I mean, there's just so many things.
A lot. Michael, we got to run. I know you're very proud of how you redecorated your office, so give us a real quick tour. What is that behind you?
Well, because you always complain about this, which is my bulletin board, which used to be behind me, but now I put up a couple of papers from the last year and my clocks, which I stole from the New York Daily News, the idea. But that's what time it is in every neighborhood in our coverage area. It all happens to be the same time, but thank the Daily News for that idea.
Yes, in case you want to know what's going on in Kingsbridge, it's very nice to know that you can find out that I don't know, it's late here. What time is it over in Woodlawn?
Exactly.
Anyway, Michael, we're thrilled that you feel better. And
Thanks,
we really didn't cover a lot of hard subject matter. We'll save that for the next time.
Hey, put me on the 2-hour show, and I'll be there. So
when I have one, you'll be on it. Anyway, really feel better. That's good. And of course, we wish all our viewers and your readers would stay safe. Check out the Riverdale Press. Great paper this week, every week. And we'll see you around town.
Thanks, Gary.
All right. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to the city. Don't go away.
In this war, we must plan forward for the next battle. The next battle is the apex. The next battle is on the top of the mountain. And that's what we're planning for every day. The number of testing has increased. The more you test, the more good you're doing. Change in number of discharged, line is going up. Why? More people going in, more people treated, more people coming out. We will be at a different place. Our challenge is to make sure that transformation and that change is positive and not negative. Let's make sure we're taking the positive lesson and not the negative lesson. Do you get up smarter? Do you get up wiser? Or do you get up bitter? Do you get up angry? We are in control of that. And we have to start to think about that. And we also have to be smarter from what we went through.
Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz, and it is my pleasure to welcome back to the program from the city. It is Ese Olumhense. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you for having me back on.
Let's just talk in general about the city. I feel, and I obviously read it every day. I get it in my email, and folks, if you don't, you really ought to. It's just a wonderful publication. I get the sense that you're almost more active and more involved these days, maybe than ever. We just talked with Michael Hinman at the Riverdale Press about being inspired because something serious is happening. Just talk to me about the climate of what's going on over at the city.
I mean, a crisis is always an opportunity to really, jump in, do a lot of reporting, kind of cover, the accountability angle of everything it seems that we've been covering, but also how much life in the city is changing. I mean, every day it feels like when is the last time or when is any time that anyone can recall everyone having to shelter in place, and stay at home. I think we're in a situation that is unprecedented, and it requires journalists to work in kind of an unprecedented way, be super busy. I feel like I'm on the phone more than I ever have been before because it's my lifeline to talk to people. I can't just walk to anything anymore, or take the bus to anything anymore.
Yeah. Again, we just had this conversation in part with Michael at the Riverdale Press. And he was talking about the challenge for reporters to do this. If you say, gee, this is going on somewhere, and you say, well, maybe I'll just run over there and see what it's like, take some pictures. And now so on one hand, you can get places quicker because you can just call. On the other hand, it is a challenge, I'm sure, to visualize things and see things and be able to really get a feel for them. So just talk about that a little bit and how that's been for you.
Yeah, I mean, my natural instinct with anything, like we wrote a story about people going to emergency rooms for flu-like symptoms more than it seemed like they have in the last few years. And usually I would just go to an ER, right? You go, you stand outside, you see the flow of traffic, and you're able to get a picture that you can kind of write up. Like, it looked like this many ambulances showed up. This person showed up with this symptom or whatever. And now you can't do any of that. I mean, you can imagine what an emergency room might be like, but you can't be there, without, full PPE. I think it presents a challenge for us in trying to figure out, yes, these stories are all important, but it forces us to be really creative and well, can we call someone and have them, describe something to us? Or how can we rely on people to take pictures of the world around them? Our world, it seems it got a lot smaller overnight. It's still a big place, New York City, but it's we're limited to the 6 feet around us.
Yeah, I think that in the long run, some of these new things, even like the communication you and I are doing right now, whereas in the past, maybe I would have said, well, I got to come over there or invite you to the studio. We can move a lot faster, as challenging as it is. And certainly for all of us on every level, even human contact, not having interaction, that's another whole thing. I want to talk a little bit about the Bronx. You are covering the Bronx, obviously. I believed in the beginning, even before the dialogue really ramped up, that if you were going to look at the borough of the Bronx, we have had epidemics before a pandemic in asthma, in diabetes, in obesity, in drug addiction. I mean, these things were we unfortunately led the world, or certainly led the state and the nation in those things. And so it was only a matter of time before, even though originally, if you remember, the Bronx numbers were pretty low. But then eventually it caught up, and now our apparently rate of death as a result of the virus, is leading, and that's quite unfortunate. You wrote about that, about the Bronx residents being susceptible to this. Talk to me about your experience, who you've talked to, and how you view it at this point.
I mean, you've nailed it. It's pretty much, we had a cocktail for disaster from the very beginning. For all of the, factors, for all of the conditions, it seems, that make you more vulnerable to catching this disease and being seriously sick or dying. The Bronx was leading in that respect. So as you said, it was at the beginning, at the outset, Queens seemed to be leading in all things. And then things seemed to, I don't want to say have equalized or balanced out, but the Bronx emerged as a place with an elevated death rate. And I think it's sad, you talk to people, and a lot of people are they're aware of this. They're aware of the social determinants and of the factors that make people prone to poor health in this borough. You know, the doctors and public health experts I spoke with also raised the fact that we may not have had enough access to testing in the borough to, you know, find out who's been infected, where they went, who they've been in contact with. I mean, it's more than a swab, right? It's like this contact tracing and a whole apparatus of things that happens when you have a confirmed case.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I've learned, because now we're not, you know, you walk by somebody in the street and sometimes it could even be a friend that you you walk by them, they're wearing a mask, you don't even know who they are. But we really live, and I can't speak for Brooklyn or Queens or Manhattan, but we really live on top of each other. And we're close to each other in the deli, and we're close to each other in the supermarket. Certainly, I live in an apartment building, and you know, we're close to each other in the elevators. And people, let's say, in public housing in more crowded situations, they're close to each other there. And now that we've been pulled apart, it's become quite apparent to me that just what we've agreed on, that, and you called it a cocktail of for disaster. All of these things just mean, you know, if one person in a family or one person in a building or one person in a neighborhood is standing online at the supermarket, before we were all really aware of this, it was going to spread. And of course, then you get into healthcare and our access to it. Very serious stuff. One thing I just wanted to say, and you know that I've had some dialogues with other people who work in the city. They were telling me how Ese has been so inspired by being in the Bronx and covering the Bronx. And I'm hoping that you can share what it is about, aside from this obvious situation, about working in the Bronx and covering the Bronx is really, for want of a better term, turn you on and have you say, wow, this really needs work.
I think the candor of people in the community is what is, like, especially motivating for me. I mean, people aren't gonna hold you up, you know, to put it very plainly. They're going to let you know exactly what's going on, what they feel they need more of, what they feel the community needs more of. I find that Bronx residents are able to be really direct. You know, I'm in a lot of these like Facebook groups for the different neighborhoods, and like you post a story and people aren't always, they may disagree with the premise of the story or whatever, but like they interface with you. And I think it's healthy to have that dialogue with them. One, you're very focused on what the community is interested in reading, where the information needs are, and what kinds of like stuff they would like reporters to focus on. It helps to be from the Bronx. I feel like I'm not thrown into an environment that's totally foreign to me. Instead, I'm just talking virtually with friends and neighbors who also live in the borough or work in the borough. Mm-hmm. It's a community that I think is especially resilient. You know, at this time, it's easy to be all gloom and doom. And, you know, people on Facebook, they're warriors. You know, they're very adamant about taking care of themselves and the people around them. I think it's something to respect for sure.
I have said this any number of times. I love walking, and of course now the world is a little different, but I love walking into any deli in any neighborhood in the Bronx because I feel like I know the people who are there. It's like, and they get it. And believe me, I've been doing this a little longer than you have. People just say what they think, and I can take it. I mean, I'm like you, you're a Bronx girl. I'm a Bronx boy, and I could just take it. I mean, I love it and I accept it. I know where they're coming from, and in this situation, we're doing the best we can. Let's talk about a couple of things that you wrote about. This is a very important issue, and that is the whole idea of nursing homes. And much like many people have covered what's going on in jails, but in many ways, nursing homes and people in nursing homes are cauldrons for this stuff. Talk about what you know about and what you've seen.
I mean, staffing has always been a massive concern at nursing homes. You know, even before now, some of the elder care experts I spoke with said that 75%, there's an old federal study from 2001, I think, 75% of nursing homes in the country don't have adequate staffing, which means that at some point during the day, a person may slip through the cracks in terms of getting changed or getting fed or meeting another clinical need that they may have. I think it's sad that this pandemic, you know, with a lot of the stories that we have done, has really exploited the iniquities that exist in our system. elderly people, they may have some agency, they've lived long lives, they've contributed in a lot of ways. But once you're in a nursing home, I think a lot of things change for them. You're less independent, you're more reliant on others. And I think that setup, coupled with some of the, factors we discussed earlier, bad, poor staffing, I think makes it kind of dangerous for some people to be in nursing homes. This isn't to say that people should pull their families out. That's not something that AARP recommends, but people are dying. People are testing positive.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And, in some cases, we know it's the staff who come in there. And again, nothing against them. But in fact, you could have staff that comes in and unwittingly communicates it. And at least one of the things we are learning is certainly senior citizens and older people are really susceptible, whereas maybe you or I would go and maybe be in some sort of contact and it wouldn't affect us right away, whereas seniors, it just seems to grab hold. Before we run out of time, maybe about a minute, you wrote a story about the Hunts Point, the market. We're so proud of the fact that we have the largest food market in the nation, but they're hurting because the supply chain is broken with the restaurants breaking down. Let's just talk about that.
I think, the quote that struck me the most reporting that story was someone saying, well, when in our lifetime did you think that every bar and every restaurant was down? No one, this timeline that we're living in, no one could have even imagined it. So I think it left those guys kind of overnight in a position to have to pivot. That's why so much, I feel like at first, and I heard from folks in the market, so much was available in our grocery stores because everything that would have gone to restaurants was diverted. I think it's really amazing that the folks in Hunts Point have rallied to keep themselves at the forefront of conversations on being, not reimbursed, I should say, by the federal government, but being taken care of if there's any relief or assistance offered. They really pushed and advocated through BOEDC and through their own kind of networks to get themselves kind of at the forefront of that conversation. But they're still supplying food, around the Northeast. I think it's pretty admirable that operation has not crumbled. A lot of people go in and out of the market to work every day. I'm super grateful to them because I can go to the grocery store and get everything I need, even toilet paper.
I think we're going to have to conclude on this point. I noticed in my own grocery store that they were well stocked, and then recently they were running low on some of the things that they always had in terms of fruits and vegetables. And actually, I'm due another trip down there, and I'm curious to see. It's very interesting to think that maybe the Hunts Point market could switch gears a little bit and provide some of those groceries to local bodegas and supermarkets, et cetera. Anyway, Ese Olumhense from the city, thank you so much for joining us. We wish you good health and staying safe. And we all appreciate the great work you do for the city. And we certainly hope you and your colleagues will join us in the future on the Bronx Buzz.
As you know, it's great to see you as well. Even from so far away, I'm still so envious of your Bronx book collection.
The books. Yes, the books. Well, we just want to keep inspiring people to love the Bronx. That's the bottom line. Anyway, thank you so much. And folks, we'll see you for Bronx Talk. This week, we're actually going to talk about some of the neighborhoods that Ese and I were talking about in terms of how they're doing. And that'll be on Bronx Talk Monday night. So we'll see you. Good night.